Those words cut through the silence of the Harrington mansion like a lightning strike. Let's fight. It wasn't just a petty outburst. It was a declaration, almost a command, from Chloe Harrington, the 19-year-old daughter of one of the wealthiest men in the city. Chloe wasn't just any spoiled heiress. She was the kind of girl who grew up with everything handed to her, yet always wanted more. Born into luxury, raised with servants waiting on her every need, Chloe's reputation stretched beyond the mansion's tall gates. She was beautiful, yes, but also infamous. Her temper was fiery, her tongue sharp enough to cut steel, and her arrogance unmatched. And there was one thing she prided herself on above all: her black belt in karate. To her, martial arts wasn't just a discipline. It was a weapon, a badge of superiority she used to intimidate anyone who dared cross her. She often reminded people that she could easily put them on the ground if she wanted to. So when Chloe's piercing voice echoed in the hallway, challenging someone to a fight, every servant, guard, and even the butler froze in disbelief. But what shocked everyone even more was who she had chosen as her opponent. Not another spoiled rich kid from her circle of friends. Not one of her martial arts classmates. Not even a professional trainer. No, the person she singled out was Rosa. Rosa, the maid. Rosa was everything Chloe wasn't. In her early 30s, she carried herself with quiet grace. She never raised her voice, never argued, never demanded recognition. She had worked in the Harrington household for years, dedicating herself to her duties, not because she wanted to serve, but because she had to. Every dollar she earned was carefully saved and sent back home to her ailing mother, who needed medication and care. Rosa rarely spoke of her struggles, but the weight she carried was visible in the tired lines on her face and the faint calluses on her hands. She wasn't flashy, she wasn't strong in the physical sense, and she had no black belt. But she possessed something Chloe could never buy with her father's money: dignity and resilience. That day, Chloe's rage sparked over something as small as a pair of shoes. Rosa, distracted after a long day of chores, had accidentally placed Chloe's designer heels in the wrong closet. To most people, that would have been a small mistake, barely worth mentioning. But to Chloe, it was an insult. "How dare you?" Chloe hissed, her manicured fingers clutching the shoes like they were priceless artifacts. "Do you even know how much these cost?" Clearly not, because if you did, you wouldn't toss them around like garbage. Rosa, standing quietly with her apron slightly wrinkled from the day's work, bowed her head. "I'm sorry, Miss Chloe. It won't happen again." But Chloe wasn't satisfied. Apologies, to her, weren't enough. She needed dominance, a spectacle, something that reminded everyone in that mansion who truly held the power. She smirked, her lips curling with cruel amusement, and said, "You know what? Since you think you can do things your way, why don't we settle this? Let's fight. Or are you too scared?" The room went still. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. Servants exchanged nervous glances, but none dared step forward. They all knew the unspoken rule: no one crossed Chloe Harrington. Yet Rosa did something no one expected. She lifted her head. For the first time, her dark eyes met Chloe's directly. There was no anger in them, no fear, just calm resolve, the kind that comes from someone who has already faced life's hardest battles outside of polished marble halls. Her voice was steady, soft, but firm enough to ripple through the silence. "If that's what you want, Miss Chloe, then so be it." Gasps filled the hallway. The butler nearly dropped the silver tray he was holding. Two maids clasped their hands over their mouths, their eyes wide with shock. Even the guards shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to intervene or watch the impossible unfold. Chloe's smirk widened into a grin of satisfaction. Finally, someone had taken the bait. Finally, she had a chance to prove her superiority not just in wealth, but in strength. But Rosa, she wasn't thinking of pride or victory. In truth, she had no interest in fighting. Yet something inside her, years of being stepped on, years of being treated like she was invisible, refused to let Chloe's insult slide this time. She wasn't agreeing to a fight because she wanted to hurt Chloe. She was agreeing because she wanted to show the spoiled girl something money could never buy: respect. The mansion's grand hallway, usually filled with the soft sound of clinking glasses and polished shoes, had become a stage for an unexpected showdown. The spoiled heiress versus the humble maid. And while Chloe saw it as a game, Rosa knew it was something far deeper. This wasn't just about shoes. This wasn't just about pride. This was about standing tall, even when the world told you to bow. The battle line had been drawn, and nothing in the Harrington household would ever be the same again. Word of the challenge spread like wildfire through the Harrington estate. Servants whispered in corners. Cooks peered out from a kitchen door, and the gardeners abandoned their tools just to hear updates. Rosa, the quiet maid, had actually accepted Chloe's challenge. It was unthinkable. Everyone knew Chloe's reputation. She wasn't just a rich girl showing off her karate belt for decoration. She was talented. From the age of 6, she'd been enrolled in the most prestigious martial arts academies money could buy. She competed in junior tournaments, trained with private instructors flown in from Japan, and boasted about sparring with champions. Her trophies decorated an entire wall of the mansion's trophy room. But Rosa? No one had ever seen her throw a punch, let alone defend herself. She was always in the background, dusting shelves, folding laundry, or carrying trays of silverware. To the staff, she was kind and reliable, but nothing about her suggested she could stand against Chloe in a fight. Still, she had said yes. By evening, the Harrington Mansion's gym was transformed into an impromptu arena. The space was massive, lined with mirrors and gleaming equipment. A boxing ring stood in the center, usually reserved for Chloe's sparring sessions. Tonight, though, it would host something far more dangerous, a battle of pride. Chloe arrived first, her long blonde hair tied tightly into a ponytail. She wore her crisp white karate gi, spotless as ever, with a black belt snugly knotted at her waist. Every movement of hers was deliberate, filled with arrogance. She cracked her knuckles and stretched dramatically, making sure the gathering staff saw just how confident she was. Across from her stood Rosa. She hadn't changed into anything special. She wore her plain maid's uniform, slacks and a simple blouse. She had no gloves, no shoes, no protective gear. She looked almost fragile compared to Chloe's polished, disciplined appearance. And yet, she stood tall. Her hands were loose at her sides, her expression calm, her presence strangely unshakable. Chloe smirked at the sight. "Don't worry," she sneered loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'll go easy on you. I wouldn't want to break the help." A few nervous chuckles rippled through the room, but most of the staff exchanged worried glances. They didn't want this to happen, but none of them dared intervene. After all, if the billionaire's daughter wanted to fight, who could stop her? Rosa didn't respond. She didn't flinch, didn't scowl, didn't even raise her fists in defense. Instead, she quietly closed her eyes. She inhaled deeply, her chest rising and falling with slow rhythm, almost meditative. Then, just under her breath, she whispered something. No one could make it out. Maybe it was a prayer. Maybe it was her mother's voice, reminding her to stay strong no matter what life threw at her. The butler, caught in the uncomfortable position of referee, lifted his trembling hand. He looked between the two women, one spoilt and fierce, the other humble and calm, and for a moment he hesitated. But then, with a shaky voice, he announced, "Begin." Chloe wasted no time. She launched forward, her first attack swift and precise. Her foot snapped up in a high kick, slicing the air with deadly accuracy. She expected Rosa to freeze, to stumble, maybe even fall. But Rosa moved, not with panic, not with clumsy reflexes. She moved like water, flowing effortlessly out of the kick's range. Her body swayed gracefully, just enough to avoid contact, her eyes still calm. The sound of Chloe's foot hitting empty air echoed across the gym. Gasps erupted from the staff watching. A maid clasped her hands to her mouth. One of the security guards muttered, "No way," under his breath. Chloe blinked, startled. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She was supposed to dominate from the first move, humiliate Rosa so thoroughly that the maid would regret ever agreeing. Yet Rosa had dodged, elegantly, naturally, as though she had done it 1,000 times before. Grinding her teeth, Chloe adjusted her stance. "Beginner's luck," She spat, charging again. This time, her fists came like daggers, fast and sharp, jabs trained by years of practice. Rosa moved again, not aggressively, but with precise timing. Each punch missed her by an inch, her body weaving and shifting just enough to escape. Her face never changed, still calm, still serene, as though she were listening to music only she could hear. The crowd couldn't believe what they were seeing. This wasn't luck. This wasn't chance. Rosa wasn't just surviving. She was controlling the rhythm of the fight. Chloe's attacks grew faster, harder, more desperate. Each strike was meant to overwhelm, to crush. Yet with every furious attempt, Rosa responded with nothing more than quiet, graceful evasion. And in that moment, something dawned on the staff. Maybe, Chloe had underestimated Rosa. Because beneath her plain uniform and gentle demeanor, Rosa carried something Chloe had never known. Not training, not trophies, but life's battles. The kind of battles that teach you to endure, to stay calm under fire, to keep moving no matter what comes your way. To Chloe, fighting was a sport. To Rosa, survival was second nature. And as the spoiled heiress launched yet another furious kick that met only air, a chilling realization crept into Chloe's mind. Her maid was no easy target. She was a storm in disguise. The fight dragged on longer than anyone expected. At first, the staff had thought Rosa's graceful dodges were a fluke, a lucky few seconds before Chloe's relentless strikes overwhelmed her. But minute after minute passed, and the maid still hadn't faltered. She wasn't striking back. She didn't need to. Her quiet composure was enough to frustrate Chloe more than any punch could. Chloe's face burned red with anger. Her ponytail whipped around as she launched yet another roundhouse kick, only for Rosa to step just out of reach, her movements effortless, almost elegant. Beads of sweat dotted Chloe's forehead, and her breathing grew heavier. How are you doing this?" Chloe demanded, her voice cracking in disbelief. She had sparred with professionals, fought in tournaments, won medals. Yet here she was, unable to land a single clean hit on a woman who wasn't even trying to fight her. Rosa's eyes softened. For the first time since the match began, she spoke. Her words were steady, her voice calm enough to quiet the entire gym. "You're strong, Miss Chloe, but strength without humility is dangerous." The sentence hung in the air like a weight. Those words hit Chloe harder than any physical strike ever could. She had always been praised for her strength, her skills, her power. Her father paraded her black belt as proof of her discipline and superiority. Coaches called her gifted. Friends admired her. Enemies feared her. Never once had anyone dared to tell her that her strength, something she valued so highly, could be dangerous. Her pride screamed at her to ignore the words, to shut them out, to win. With a furious cry, Chloe charged. She put everything into her next move, a powerful blow aimed squarely at Rosa's chest. The air whooshed around her fist as she struck forward, determined to finally bring her opponent down. But Rosa was ready. In one fluid motion, so swift it almost seemed rehearsed, Rosa sidestepped. She didn't just dodge, she flowed. Her hand met Chloe's wrist, redirecting the force of the punch with almost no effort. And before anyone in the room could process what had happened, Chloe was spun around, her arm gently but firmly pinned behind her back. She gasped, stumbling, her knees hitting the padded floor of the gym. Silence swept through the room. The staff's jaws dropped, their eyes wide in shock. Chloe Harrington, the billionaire's daughter, the black belt, the fiery heiress known for never losing, was on the ground, defeated, not by another fighter of her caliber, not by a trainer or a rival, but by Rosa, the maid she had mocked, the woman she had dismissed as powerless. For the first time in her life, Chloe wasn't the one in control. And yet, what Rosa did next was what truly stunned everyone. She let her go. Immediately, her grip loosened, her hand gently guiding Chloe back to her feet. Rosa extended her arm not as an opponent, but as someone offering help. "I don't wish to embarrass you," Rosa said softly, her tone carrying no trace of arrogance or malice. "I only defended myself. Fighting is not about pride. It's about protecting, about knowing when not to hurt." Her words were simple, but they struck deeper than any victory celebration could have. Chloe staggered upright, her chest heaving, her pride shattered into 1,000 pieces. She stared at Rosa, speechless. No one had ever dared humble her before. Her father always excused her tantrums. Her trainers always praised her skill. Her friends always flattered her. But here stood Rosa, plain, humble Rosa, who had not only bested her physically, but had also shown her a kind of strength Chloe had never understood. Around the gym, the staff shifted uncomfortably, unsure what to do. Some exchanged hopeful glances. For years, they had endured Chloe's cruelty in silence. Seeing her humbled, seeing her forced to confront her flaws, was something they never imagined possible. But Chloe herself didn't know how to react. She clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. She wanted to scream, to deny what had happened, to insist it was luck. But deep down, she knew it wasn't. Rosa hadn't humiliated her. She hadn't gloated. She hadn't mocked her. Instead, she had shown Chloe something her wealth and titles had never taught her: restraint, compassion, true discipline. For the first time, Chloe felt small, not because Rosa had made her feel weak, but because Rosa had shown her what real strength looked like. And that truth cut deeper than any wound. Chloe's lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. She simply stood there, her pride and her identity trembling, while Rosa's steady gaze seemed to pierce right through her. It was a moment that would haunt Chloe Harrington for a long time. And for Rosa, it wasn't about victory at all. It was about showing that strength without humility meant nothing. For the first time in her 19 years, Chloe Harrington felt small. Not because Rosa had overpowered her, but because the truth had finally pierced through the armor of arrogance she had worn her whole life. Her body trembled, not from pain, but from something far more unfamiliar: humility. Her cheeks flushed, her chest tightened, and her eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. The heiress who had never lost a fight suddenly found herself on the verge of breaking, not from physical defeat, but from the weight of her own reflection. Her voice came out fragile, trembling with something her staff had never heard from her before: vulnerability. Why didn't you hit me?" Chloe whispered, her words barely audible in the silence of the gym. The question wasn't just about the fight. It was about everything. Why hadn't Rosa taken the chance to humiliate her? Why hadn't she retaliated for years of insults, for all the cruel remarks, for all the times Chloe had treated her like she was less than human? Rosa's response came softly, yet it struck the room like a thunderclap. "Because I don't fight to destroy," Rosa said, her dark eyes steady, her voice carrying the weight of experience that went far beyond combat. "Life has already given me battles tougher than this. I don't need to prove myself by hurting you." The words echoed through Chloe's mind, each syllable chiseling away at her pride. She stood frozen, her breath catching in her throat. No one had ever spoken to her like that, calm, honest, without fear. And for the first time, Chloe remembered. She remembered all the moments she had dismissed as insignificant. The time she mocked Rosa for moving too slowly, not caring that Rosa had spent the entire night awake on the phone with her sick mother. The time she tossed clothes on the floor, demanding Rosa pick them up without so much as a thank you. The time she laughed with friends about the help, while Rosa quietly stood in the background, her dignity intact even as she endured cruelty. Chloe's arrogance had blinded her. She had never once considered that Rosa's silence wasn't weakness. It was strength. That Rosa's calm wasn't passivity. It was resilience. That behind Rosa's humble uniform stood a woman who carried burdens Chloe couldn't even imagine. Now, faced with Rosa's words, Chloe felt the cracks forming inside her. The walls she had built, walls of wealth, of privilege, of superiority, began to crumble. For the first time, she saw Rosa clearly, not as the maid, not as the help, but as a human being. A woman who possessed the kind of strength Chloe's trophies and medals could never measure. A strength not born from privilege, but from hardship. A strength carved by sacrifice, dignity, and wisdom. Chloe swallowed hard, her throat dry. Her mind screamed to push the feeling away, to cling to pride, to reassert control. But her heart whispered something else, something she had long ignored. the truth. Tears pricked at her eyes. She blinked rapidly, refusing to let them fall, terrified of looking weak in front of the staff. But deep inside, something was shifting. Something Chloe didn't even have a name for. The staff watched in stunned silence. They had seen Chloe throw tantrums, scream, and belittle. They had seen her arrogance fill every corner of the mansion. But they had never seen her like this. Fragile, shaken, humbled. And they could sense it. Something inside the heiress had cracked open. Chloe stared at Rosa, her lips parting as if to say something, but no words came. How could she apologize for years of cruelty in a single sentence? How could she explain the storm inside her chest? And yet, she didn't need to, because in that moment, the way she looked at Rosa said it all. For the first time, Chloe's gaze held no contempt, no superiority. It held something far rarer. Recognition. Recognition that Rosa was not beneath her. Recognition that Rosa had always been more than the maid. Recognition that true strength had been standing in front of her all along, disguised in humility. The silence stretched on, heavy and sacred, as if the walls of the Harrington mansion themselves were holding their breath. And in that silence, Chloe changed. Not completely, not yet, but a seed had been planted. A seed of respect, of humility, of humanity. The spoiled heiress had glimpsed the truth. And the truth was this: Rosa, the woman she had belittled, was stronger than she could ever hope to be. The fight was over, but its echoes lingered long after Rosa had released Chloe's arm. The silence in the Harrington mansion's gym fell heavy, almost holy, as though everyone knew they had witnessed something extraordinary. Chloe stood still, her heart pounding, her pride in ruins. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like the victor, the heiress, or the fighter. She felt human. The arrogance that had shielded her for so long cracked wide open, and through that crack came something new: humility. Slowly, almost timidly, Chloe bowed her head. Her blonde ponytail fell forward. Her shoulders sagged, and her lips trembled as words she had never spoken to anyone before slipped out. I'm sorry, Rosa." Gasps rippled through the staff. Chloe Harrington, spoiled, fiery Chloe, who had never apologized to a single soul, was now bowing her head to the maid she had once mocked. Rosa smiled, her face calm and kind. She didn't look triumphant. She didn't look smug. She simply looked understanding. "It's all right," Rosa said gently. "What matters is what you do from now on." Those words struck Chloe deeper than any reprimand her father had ever given her. Forgiveness, so freely offered, was more powerful than any punishment could have been. And it left Chloe with a choice: to stay the same or to change. From that day forward, Chloe changed. At first, it was subtle. She still trained in karate, but her movements shifted. She no longer fought with smirk or a need to prove her superiority. Instead, she moved with discipline, with focus, with a quiet respect for the art she had once used as a weapon of pride. Her strikes became cleaner, not harsher. Her sparring sessions ended with bows of respect, not arrogant grins. But the biggest change wasn't in the dojo. It was in the mansion. The staff, who had once tiptoed around her tantrums, began to notice the difference immediately. Chloe no longer barked orders or tossed clothes for Rosa to pick up. Instead, she began doing little things that shocked everyone. She carried her own dishes back to the kitchen. She folded her laundry instead of leaving it scattered on the floor. Sometimes, she even joined Rosa in simple chores: dusting bookshelves, wiping counters, sweeping floors. At first, the staff thought it was a joke. Some even worried it was a setup, a test to catch them slacking. But soon, they realized Chloe was sincere. The girl who once believed herself untouchable was finally learning to touch the ground, to respect those who walked on it with her. Her father, Charles Harrington, noticed too. One evening, he came home to find Chloe helping Rosa set the dining table. His sharp eyes scanned the room, puzzled. This was the same daughter who once threw tantrums if her napkin wasn't folded perfectly. Now, she was laughing softly as Rosa showed her how to place the cutlery in the proper order. Later that night, Charles sat Chloe down in his study. His voice was calm, but there was a spark of pride in his eyes. "I hear you've been helping Rosa with chores," he said. Chloe lowered her head, suddenly nervous. Yes, father. I... I realized I've been wrong. I treated her terribly. I treated everyone terribly. But she taught me something I'll never forget. Charles leaned back in his leather chair, studying his daughter carefully. Then, with a rare smile, he said, "It seems Rosa has taught you a lesson no school or dojo ever could." For a man who had always worried that wealth might spoil his only child, this moment was everything. He didn't scold her. He didn't remind her of her mistakes. He simply let his pride show in his eyes, knowing his daughter had finally taken her first steps toward becoming the woman he hoped she would one day be. Over time, Chloe and Rosa grew close, closer than anyone expected. What began as a relationship of employer and employee evolved into something deeper. Chloe began confiding in Rosa, asking for advice not just about chores, but about life. One afternoon, while Chloe was practicing her karate katas in the gym, Rosa walked by carrying fresh linens. Chloe paused mid-strike and grinned. "You know, I should start calling you Sensei Rosa." Rosa chuckled, shaking her head. "I'm no sensei, Miss Chloe." But Chloe's grin softened into sincerity. "You are to me." And she meant it, because Rosa had taught her the greatest martial arts lesson of all, one no black belt could ever represent. The lesson that strength without humility was weakness, and that true power came from compassion. Whenever guests came to the mansion, Chloe introduced Rosa with pride. "This is Rosa," she would say, her voice ringing with warmth. "She's not just our maid. She's the strongest, kindest woman I know." At first, visitors were startled. Some even laughed, thinking Chloe was joking. But when they looked at her face, they saw no mockery, only respect. The same Chloe who once lived to show off her wealth and strength was now showing off someone else's character. And that shift was more shocking than any fight could ever be. What began as an arrogant challenge in the mansion's hallway turned into something unforgettable. A spoiled heiress met her match, not in fists, but in heart. Rosa's quiet dignity and unshakable strength planted a seed inside Chloe, one that grew into humility, compassion, and respect. The fight had ended in minutes, but the lesson lasted a lifetime. And so the story spread, not just among the staff, but beyond the walls of the Harrington estate. The tale of how a black belt rich girl challenged her maid to a fight, and was humbled in a way that shocked everyone. But most importantly, it changed Chloe forever, because she finally learned that true strength isn't measured by belts, trophies, or titles. It's measured by the heart behind it.